Right. Hi, Tanya, and hi, Patricia, and
Hi,
hi, everyone
Martin.
on the line. I'm wary of saying, good morning or good afternoon because I know we have international presence. And I'm also wary of not saying just ladies because it did see we might have a few gents on the line. But welcome to everyone. Indeed, we are in extreme experienced company, as Ayanda has pointed out. And in our discussion between myself, Tanya, and Patricia, we're really going to unpack what we believe the key elements are of a procurement position, in specific, a senior procurement position, and how women can play to their strengths to claim these positions, and possibly where are the areas that women might find more challenging to fulfill. You've heard that both Patricia and Tanya have a wealth of experience in this regard, and I'm sure as you are, I'm also very excited to hear their perspectives. What is also interesting, and that's why we're going to dabble between the experience in the corporate space. Also, we're going to hear a little bit more from them in a few minutes on how the corporate environment differs from the consulting or building your own firm. But let me start by saying the economy over the past few years has demanded the increased need for procurement professionals to create sustainable value, process improvements, and eliminating hidden costs. This is a mouthful, and I'm sure the past few days of the conference has honed in on some of these technical aspects as well. And you guys are probably even more aware than I am of the real business expectations of procurement professionals these days. As an industrial psychologist and someone that practiced within the area of human resources, I've come to see that business requires three things from procurement professionals. And in particular, if we're looking at more senior positions, I see that there are a functional area that procurement professionals need to fulfill, and this is no different than any other role. It's about the technical expertise of the position. The second expectation business have is on the business acumen side. So businesses more and more require, and in particular, the more senior you go as a procurement professional, that you also understand where your role fits into the corporate holistic strategy and picture. So where's your value add, right? And the third, and probably the most important aspect that I've seen is expected by senior procurement professionals is that of leadership skills. According to a 2016 study from the Harvard University, it was found that 85% of job success comes from soft skills, with only the 15% remaining from the more technical aspects. And in my opinion, and I'm sure many of you would have experienced, the more senior you go, the larger that leadership expectation become. And I know a lot have been said about leadership in day one of the conference, and rightfully so, because it's so important in the professional world today. But we will also add a little twist to that topic, and we will branch out beyond leadership into the business acumen as well as the technical field. But there will be a lot of focus on leadership in our discussion, but focus on leadership in the procurement space and leadership from Tanya and from Patricia's perspective. So I know that there's also been quite a lengthy and detailed discussion in day one by Sibongile on female leaders' reaction during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I also want to just take you guys back. Some of you, I'm sure, have read it, an article in the New York Times dated May 2020 that said that at that stage, women-led nations are doing better at responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And they ascribe this to the leadership styles displayed by these female presidents or prime ministers. Now, the leadership styles or behaviors they displayed included, amongst others, welcoming diverse opinions, being consultative. It was cautious, risk averse, caring, thoughtful, relatable to their countries in their communication and their engagement during this crisis period. And what we've seen in the opposite end of their male counterparts, that the males tended to act more aggressively, dominantly, in the aim of showing no fear towards the pandemic. I want to bring this closer to home. Tanya, if you can give us your thoughts, and I'm sure you have faced many crises, challenging times in your career before. What type of leadership style have you deployed in these crisis times that you might have experienced? And what do you think was best suited? What type of style was best suited in these crisis situations? And maybe if you can add what part of this style did you feel came naturally to you as a woman? Quite keen to hear your thoughts.
Oh, well, thank you. And I've got to say, I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. I've only just tuned in about half an hour ago, and I can just feel such great energy from you all. I think the team seems to have done a fantastic job organising it, and I'm always excited to be connected with my good friend Nikki Abdenor, who I never get to talk to enough, and so it's lovely to be on the same agenda as Nikki. Look, I actually think the last 6 months has been my biggest leadership challenge of my career, because, you know, really for all of us, I'm assuming, you know, the balls were really thrown up in the air. And, you know, I have 3 businesses, a lot of them about face-to-face networking and training. And all of a sudden we couldn't meet up with people. So we really had to, I hate to say the word pivot, and really put 100% of our businesses online. And, you know, some members of our team really weren't ready for that. I had people leave the business. You know, had to go out to clients and talk about the changes in the business. And, you know, I think it's probably been the most challenging, and probably I've worked the hardest, which in the last 6 months, it's sort of been around the clock kind of initiative to keep my businesses on track. And I think, you know, what you see in Jacinda Ardern and, you know, Angela Merkel is, you know, authenticity to a certain degree, you know, the strength to show vulnerability at the right times, and empathy. But I think what I wanted to really reinforce here is that what most successful women are working off is a really strong base. And that is, you know, you need to get the fundamentals in place first. You know, you need to make sure that you've got your training and your credentials. And, you know, I always found that in my earlier career, you know, I did so much study, and that really gave me the technical knowledge. And I guess this is, if we were to look at Maslow's hierarchy, this is the essential needs. But then there's been something that I've had to work on a lot, and that is self-belief. And you hear a lot about women and, you know, the imposter syndrome, and I've had to battle this my whole life, you know, like insecurity, lack of confidence, believing in yourself. And, you know, you really need to work on those voices, you know, that are sort of chipping away, telling you that you can't do something. And I think to a certain degree that technical knowledge helps you, but, you know, you really have to believe in yourself. And that gives you the ability to actually be authentic and be vulnerable. Because I think people are looking at these things and saying, oh, well, maybe I just need to be that. But if you don't have that base, you know, the confidence and the technical skills and the knowledge, as well as the belief in yourself, it's hard to be, you know, authentic and vulnerable, because you're sort of working on an uneasy base. So actually, when you see these people, I think it shows that they're actually quite on top of their game, and they can do that, you know, and demonstrate that and don't feel threatened by it. And I think that's sort of what we should all aspire to, is the ability to do that. And I think there's plenty of women around the world who do demonstrate those great capabilities. I guess one little takeaway nugget and term that one of my female webinar participants said was talking about compassionate procurement at the moment. And I think that's something that we have to be mindful of. A lot of our suppliers at the moment are challenged and are, you know, undergoing financial stress. And we need to be listening and communicating more to our supply base than ever before. And I think that's something where, you know, no matter whether you're a man or a woman, having that authenticity, that empathy is key at the moment. But I probably talked too much on that answer, but they're just some thoughts.
No, absolutely, Tanya. I mean, without going into too much detail, you know, this confidence thing, when we talk about female professionals, I have actually recently urged a friend of mine who focuses on coaching. I said, look, there's a gap in the market. You need to specialize in female confidence, you know, coaching female professionals, young and old, how to break the barrier. Myself, I've received coaching on that, and I cannot agree more with the statement. And I think the key to this is getting the right tools to reinforce the brain patterns, your thinking patterns, how you think during these crisis times when you're under pressure, how to realign that to sort of build what I call your confidence wall, so that self-doubt doesn't creep in. This is yes.
Use it as a motivator, you know, to actually push you forward rather than debilitate you.
Absolutely. And because this is such a hot topic now, I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well, Patricia. You know, this female leadership in crisis, Tanya has mentioned authenticity, you know, ensuring that you've got that solid technical skills in place to help develop the confidence, but also you need to work on it. What has been your experience in times of crisis? What type of skills in leadership as a female do you believe is the best to deploy?
Thanks, Martine. It really is an honor, firstly, I must say, to be part of this panel, hearing all the experts speak. And I'm surely going to be taking a lot away from this. And thank you so much to the organizers for the opportunity. Talking about females managing in crisis and COVID, I think when it was first announced in South Africa, we were all like deers caught in the headlights, not sure where to go. And in our network, I found that the people that had that confidence, or the people that had the confidence found the ability to become innovative. And those were the businesses that started doing well. I know we're talking about the recession globally, but speaking to some of our clients, some of them has done exceptionally well during this time. And those were the people, and a lot of them are female-owned companies, quite interestingly. And those were the guys that immediately sat back and said, you know, what can we do to make sure that we survive? And they employed the kind of leadership, well, we've got a crisis, it's either sink or swim, and many of them decided to swim. My own personal view on how I deal with times of crisis, I'm a thinker. You being an industrial psychologist, you'll understand I analyze in my head, and sometimes I analyze to death. But I find that I do think about these things, and I carefully think out what my next steps are going to be. So during that time, I become very quiet, and the partner that I work with, being male, he sometimes gets very agitated because he doesn't know what I'm thinking. But it's important to retreat to that quiet place and build up your resilience so that when you do come back, you're more effective in how you respond. And we found that our business at the beginning of the pandemic was really struggling. And after we had our quiet time and our reflection time, and when we went back, we found that we had to be innovative in how we support our clients. We couldn't see them face to face, but our technology increased. We've got about 5 different platforms in how we speak with them. And we started offering different services. We started doing online coaching. Away from the procurement and supply chain arena, but it created, the pandemic created that platform. And suddenly the stress levels were less, and you started feeling that you were in control again of your destiny and where your organization was heading towards.
I heard a great thing last night. They said with Formula One racing, the race is won on the curves, not on the flat track. So it's the people who can, really, handle the twists and turns that do win the race. We've also heard a lot from a guy called Nick Gowing, who talks about thinking the unthinkable, and he's done a lot of research on these sort of black swan events and disruptions. And this is going to be the thing that differentiates leadership into the future, is the ability to adapt to these big seismic changes. So it's definitely a skill that we all need to learn and build our resilience and get ready for more. I don't think this is just the start.
Yes, no, absolutely. And in particular, what we've also been seeing in South Africa, Tanya, is the impact that we are feeling in the economy now. More and more people, when I go out in recruitment at the moment, I'm interviewing people who has been retrenched, who is out of a job, and without wanting to go into that in the interview, because it's not the platform to do that, I can definitely see people's confidence has taken a knock during these times. You see people's self-belief is not quite there. You can actually feel people's morale in general. It's just down, even in the best of time where you need to put your best foot forward, like an interview. People are, I can feel the energy in interviews. It's not the same. So yeah, now is the time absolutely to rise. And you've both mentioned an interesting fact now around your own businesses. And Patricia, you've mentioned what changes you've implemented, different services. Tanya, you've mentioned you've probably worked harder than ever before. Tell us a little bit more. How does the role of a procurement professional differ from the corporate environment to having your own business and consulting? Is there a difference at all? Patricia, maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Martine. There is definitely a big difference. The first one is you now become the service provider, and you're on the other side of the desk, and that is educational in itself. When you work for a corporate, you have the safe haven, you've got your IT support, you've got everything nicely wrapped up. So when anything goes wrong, it's the help desk call away. When you're on your own, you are the help desk. So that is one of the big changes. What we have found is, what I've certainly found with some of the clients that I've been working with, is because I'm not involved in the organization's daily run of the business and also the corporate politics part of it, I have clearer insights into the areas that we're working on, because I don't have the clutter of sitting around having to be in 20 meetings a day. All I have is the data and the client request in front of me. And that has helped us to not only speed up, but be a lot more effective in how we're setting up our clients and how we're supporting them. I mentioned earlier that we went into a company to do a business redesign, and part of that was from a procurement perspective. And when we walked in and I got the data, I was horrified. They had about 5 different systems, manual systems, to manage the same data. And the interesting part is they actually had an electronic system that could do all of that. And it didn't occur to them, because they were so into the detail of what they needed to do during the day, that the innovation part and the stepping back and looking back in and saying, what do I need to do to make this different, was just not there. And we looked like heroes to give them the obvious answer that was there all the time, which is always good, because that opens other possibilities. Being on the other side of the desk also has big downsides. And one of that is, because you're not part of the organization, and especially when you're working with a procurement team, there's the fear that they will be without a job, for example. And because companies are so dynamic in how they change, and they're always re-engineering, there's that fear. And then we sometimes feel that we get resistance. And it was good for me to see that side, because again, when you're sitting on the procurement side, you have certain powers and you have certain structures and things in place that keeps you safe. And also your identity becomes associated with the organization. So when we're talking about an organization, we're actually talking about that person. When you're on your own, you don't have that identity other than the reputation of your organization. And you're competing with a number of guys out there doing exactly the same thing, much bigger than you, and that has all the tools to offer the service where you're small and you're working on a small scale. And I think that for us was the big challenging factor, that you were competing against these huge guys. And if there isn't something that differentiates you from all of them, why should any company be using you? And the important thing is to be innovative continuously and be consistent in how you service your client. The journey is, I found the journey to be quite a bit of a roller coaster ride. Some days I forget which side of the desk I should be on. But the clients are quite quick to tell you which side you should be on. From the financial side, I think that has been our biggest challenge. Most companies want long payment terms, etc., and a small company cannot afford to do that. And if you aren't solid when you start off from a financial perspective and your plans aren't well in place, you will be struggling. And my last point on that is the opportunity for growth has been phenomenal, because you get an opportunity to have a 360-degree view of your supply chain. And it's easier for us being outside and not being cluttered with all the day-to-day responsibilities, to be able to offer our clients something that's sustainable, but also still workable.
Yeah, no, it's I can only imagine. First you're on the one side, then on the other side, and how to keep the hat on at all times is a challenge. I'm going to dare to ask Tanya if you've got a preference for one of the two, or maybe in your own experience as a female, is there one that you enjoy more than the other, corporate versus self-employed?
Well, look, if people ever come to me and ask, you know, should I start my own business, I always encourage women to stay in large corporates. And I'll tell you why, but it's easy for me to say that given that I've had 20 years in my own business. But I just think it's very important that we have a very large cohort of women stay with large corporations and ensure that, you know, and it is happening, that we do have women running companies and that we do have more women on boards. And we're really only going to get that if women stay in large corporates, because really that's how you do qualify to get to these senior levels. So, you know, I really encourage women as much as I can, you know, if it's impossible, and I know how frustrating it is working in large corporates, but you've also got to remember it's very frustrating owning your own business. The grass always seems greener on the other side. And Patricia raised some great points there. I mean, cash is one of them. You know, going out and starting your own business, if you don't have 1 to 2 years worth of savings, you know, it can be a challenge, you know, because you don't always win the work straight away, and when you do, you know, it can be quite lumpy. So that's one issue. And I think Patricia raised a lot of great points, and one of them is when you're in a large corporate, everyone comes to you. You learn so much. You get the corporate training, and you know, you're just learning all the time. In your own business, you're learning other things, and a lot of those are about survival and human nature and how to manage people in a team. And you know, don't get me wrong, I've had a fantastic 20 years in my business. You know, the other side is you're able to fill your dream, create your vision, create a business that you actually want to work in, and all those things. But you know, I feel like when I left corporate in my early 30s, I was just a bit frustrated. You know, I felt like there was a, you know, glass ceiling, and, you know, that you were always being judged. But do you know what? When you go into your own business, you're being judged too by your clients. So there's really no escape, is there, Patricia?
Definitely not.
One of the reasons I started my business was the flexibility. You know, I wanted to have children, I wanted to have my own agenda and diary, and really now I think businesses have moved so much now with flexibility, particularly at the moment, given we're all working from home. I think there's been a really big change in thinking there. Mind you, I'm sure most of the working mums are looking forward to getting into the office, and so you know, things have changed, and look, it's not for everyone, but you know, I think you've really got to think through the pros and cons for that. But for the sisterhood, I'm hoping more women stay in large corporates, so we see a better representation, a better diversity in the senior levels of organisations.
Yes, and what I hear both of you say, it's really about your personal circumstances, what is right for you. When you start thinking about branching out, assess your personal circumstances before you make a big step, and then secondly, have a hell of a lot of cash as a backup. So that's great advice always. I want to take us a little bit more to the technical side of things. We've mentioned that three components of a procurement professional: the leadership, the business acumen, and then the functional expertise. Now, in my experience, you know, negotiation, even though it really has become an important aspect of many roles in organizations, I do believe that it's also quite at the core of a procurement position. Now, Patricia, can you share with us if you have found that negotiation with females, other females, you know, are easier or more challenging than their male counterparts? And if so, why?
Martine, I found it to be a lot more challenging because of our, Tanya mentioned it earlier, of that sense of or lack of confidence, if I may call it that. We go into a meeting a lot more prepared. I remember at my last organization, I was negotiating a glass contract with a female lawyer. The previous contract was done with a male lawyer, so I was pretty confident that we could walk this. And I walked in, and this lady was so prepared. I found myself after 10 minutes saying, I'll have to consult with legal, I'll have to consult with legal. But what it taught me was that when we female to female, because we enjoy attention to detail so much, we take everything into account. And we make sure that when we're walking into that room, to show our ability and capability as well, we come armed with all the tools we need to make sure that we have a great success on that. So I found that in my career, when I was, that incident taught me a great lesson, that when I know that the lady or the person I'm going to be negotiating with is female, I go in 10 times more prepared. With all respect to the males on the call, males tend to negotiate from an ego perspective. And they know they have that over self-confidence because they've been around doing this for a long time themselves. And they know that they will walk the negotiation. With ladies, it's completely different. And as I said, I've learned my lesson that when you go in, you go 20 times more prepared.
That's good to know. So recently, I'm not sure if anyone else on the call has heard about what's referred to as the term the pink recession. I'm keen to hear from you, Tanya, if you can just maybe unpack this term, pink recession, and in your view, how it will impact procurement in the future, now or in the future.
Yeah, well, look, it's certainly something, you know, I read it in The Guardian probably a couple of months ago, and it really resonated with me and, you know, really made me think. I don't want to be too, you know, generalize too much, but with everyone working from home, you know, it's probably highly likely that it's the women in the household that are bearing the brunt of not only the homeschooling, but also all the household chores and also trying to keep their jobs. And so it just occurred to me, well, look, this could be a real issue for women in them trying to progress. Now, having said that, you know, I've had a lot of my male community members on the phone nursing a 2-year-old with a book. And, you know, I think times are really changing, and you know, one of my top tips for any woman is marry well. Now that sounds like an advice from the 1950s, doesn't it? And when I say marry well, it's not someone who's handsome, successful and rich. I say get someone who'll do 50% of the household chores. You know, that's marrying well these days. Someone who carries the load and really sees it as a partnership. And I think that is a huge enabler for your career. And, you know, just to make sure you've got someone carrying the load, because if women are trying to do all these things at the moment, it's going to impact their careers. But hopefully we'll be going back to work soon, won't we?
No, I can't agree more with you, Tanya. Maybe I can share some personal experience now. I've seen many friends, you know, having their first baby, and it's all a moonshine and roses, and you know, the mom is you know, investing all her time and energy, and then comes the second, you know, and dads are so excited about the first baby because they are there in the back, you know, the back end, doing the backup, just passing on the bottle, and come the second child, you know, it's like a shock to the dad, because now all of a sudden, you know, he's got full-time one responsibility whilst the mom is taking care probably of the newborn, etc. I have twin girls of 15 months, and I can tell you, I cannot agree more with that partnership. So fortunately, I have ensured that my husband does not see him participating in these household and baby chores as thank you, honey, for helping. It's like, well, obviously, what else will you be doing? So you know, it's so important, and having twins sort of just establishes that 50-50 quite early on, you know. So thanks.
You know, it's also when you're in a partnership that you recognize you're in different stages of your careers, because at one stage my husband was traveling the world half the year. I mean, it was the toughest time. But now he's at home nearly all the time, and he's now helping a lot, and it's great. I have 2 boys for them to see that, and I'm really training them to do all the housework as well. You know, I want to produce some good husbands, you know, or partners, you know, for people.
Yeah.
You know, it's also, you know, communication and making sure, you know, if someone has obviously got more demands on them, but I just think it's important for, you know, women and to talk about these things, that it's not expected that they have to do everything. I mean, it is a partnership, and you know, I can only imagine how difficult it is for people who are locked down with 2, you know, children under 6. Extremely difficult, extremely difficult, and I really salute you.
Thank you. I think one last thought on this. I worked with a very experienced HR director a couple of years back. She always used to say there can only be one career lead in a relationship. And at that point in time, I was still a bit naive, and I was of the belief that no, that's definitely not the case. There can be 2. I now realize that you can have one career lead at a time. It doesn't mean it needs to be for the full partnership or marriage or relationship. You have to take turns, and I kind of hear that's what you're also talking about, Tanya, taking turns. When is it whose turn to go full out, and when is it whose turn to maybe just carry a bit more in the home space? Maybe Patricia, so you know, I feel a bit cautious bringing this up, but I'm going to raise it because it's something that has come to my attention from an HR perspective. And it's been said that females are more emotionally sensitive, and they are more emotional about receiving critique. And they're prone to steer away from conflict, because any conflict situations could be perceived by females as people dishing out critique. And again, this is a massive generalization. What's been your thoughts on that? Could this link to the whole concept of our self-confidence, and when people differ with us, we tend to think they differ with us as a person, and we possibly then doubt ourselves again, and therefore we respond with maybe more emotion and passion? That's just a thought. What is your thoughts on it?
So before I answer, like you say, it's a very conflicting point of view for a lot of people. So please, ladies, don't shoot me down. I agree. I agree that we are a lot more sensitive, but I'm going to qualify why I'm saying that. You've mentioned some of the points, Martine. One of the areas that I find is that females are a lot harder on themselves. We tend to have the society telling us you're only good enough if you look a certain way, and if you behave a certain way. And the expectation has always been that women would be the peacemakers. If you think at home, if your two kids are fighting, you are usually the one that break it up. And you are the one that will say, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And we take that into the workplace, and we try and emulate that there as well. So I certainly find that we struggle when we get, I won't call it critique, but I'll call it, or conflict, I'll call it feedback, because that feedback leads to the conflicting feelings that we feel. We also, I remember when I was in the corporate environment, and when it comes to performance reviews, I used to not sleep the night before. And I used to, by the time I walk into the meeting with my line manager, and at that stage, most of them were men, I was completely wound up already. And I found that I couldn't listen, because I was waiting for the person to tell me what I'm doing wrong, as opposed to the good stuff that I was doing. And if you can recall also performance reviews in the old days, it was all about the things that you did wrong. And as management styles changed and management styles evolved, I was very fortunate to work with this very senior HR gentleman who before his retirement was the HR director at Distel. And he was assigned as my mentor and coach. And this gentleman changed the view. All the things I'd done well, all my strengths, how he admired them, etc. And when it then came to the actual feedback part on where I had to develop, that conversation became easier. And that is experience that I've taken with me wherever I go. And it's helped me in my personal career when I go into these meetings, or even just generally having a conflict situation with a co-worker, with a peer, etc., to stop and listen and question. So to understand the frame of reference where the person is coming from, and understand quite clearly that this isn't really about my ego and about me and that little voice that sits on my shoulder and tell me that I'm not that good enough and that I'm not able to do these things. And one of the big lessons this gentleman taught me was that if I close myself up to feedback, I would not have an opportunity to grow. And one of the areas he had to coach me on, I was working, as I mentioned, in this very male-dominated environment. And I discovered, or I was told, that some of the gents were very scared of me. So they didn't really want to confront me when they were disagreeing with me. And I thought, man, me a little woman far down the pecking order, why would you be scared? But what had happened over the years is, to survive in the male environment, I started emulating them. I started thinking like them and doing things like them, interrupting when people are talking. And not listening to what they're saying because I'm so eager to get my point across. Working with this senior HR official helped me on a number of levels. I managed to get back to being a female and being comfortable with being a female and having my sensitive areas. And one of the most important things he taught me was we focus so much on our development areas that we don't nurture our strengths. And by nurturing those strengths, we're always going to have development areas. And I don't say don't take note of them, especially when you did what I did, where I became like my male counterparts. But use those strengths to develop your career and take you to the next level. But also more importantly, as a female, be aware of what they are. And when somebody tells you, well done, I really enjoyed what you did on X, Y, and Z, explore it a little bit more. And use that in your toolkit. Today, a lot of the areas that I was developed on in my corporate career, I use in business. And especially when you're dealing with people that feel insecure around you, and it's usually, unfortunately, from the female side. And when you're entering businesses where there's already a lot of conflict, I found that those things that I learned during that time really helps me. So in conclusion, Martine, do women deal well with conflict? No, we're not there yet. It's a journey. And to start that journey in understanding yourself is having the authentic conversations, not with anybody, but with yourself first. Understand who you are, understand what makes you tick, understand why you behave in a certain way at a certain time, and use your strengths. They were given to you as a gift. Use them to develop yourself and your career further.
Tanya, to finish off, back to the COVID-19 topic, it certainly has challenged supply chain strategy paradigms, and what in your opinion are the breaking value opportunities for procurement to leverage right now? I'm sure there's many, but what do you believe is it at the moment?
Well, look, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for everyone to really make their mark in procurement because, as I said at the start, all the cards have been thrown up in the air. And what McKinsey is calling some of these opportunities is zero-based categories. So, for example, property is going to be a zero-based category because it's the whole question of how we use corporate property, how we use offices is being thrown up in there. So we can totally redesign that category. And there's just everywhere you look at the moment, there's just so many changes and opportunities, but also so many risks. With the whole geopolitical situation has been put into question, single source global supply, even the way we manage inventory. We used to be all about lean and just in time. Now we're moving more to just in case. Payment terms and how we manage working capital. So I really think it's a great time for everyone to be trying to make a mark and do something different. And one of my pieces of advice is, fill that trophy cabinet, because when it comes to performance reviews, you need to be able to point, I redesigned that, I re-engineered that, I delivered this. You need to be able to show to senior management how you've really taken turned all these challenges into opportunities. And those are the sort of leaders we're going to need into the future, is the people that can deal with the disruption and find a way out of the curve and into the flat track.